Welcome back to another tale of Tales of the Beard. I am your host, Beardlaws. Let's get into this. In the heart of a forgotten forest lies Hollow Creek, a place where the whispers of the past never die and the shadows, they never fade. When Sarah, who was driven by curiosity, ventured into the decaying remnants of the Miller family home, she unearths a chilling secret that pulls her deeper into the house's dark grip. As the walls close in and the whispers grow louder, she realizes too late that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Will she escape, or will she become another lost soul forever, part of the Hollow Creek's haunting history? What do we think here? The night was suffocating, heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine as Sarah's headlights pierces through the dense fog that clung to the forest like a suffocating shroud. Her hands tightened around the wheel of her old Subaru, knuckles white. She had never believed in ghost stories, never thought much of the whispers of Hollow Creek, but something about the mystery of the place had intrigued her for many years. It wasn't just the story of the Miller family, whose disappearance had been the subject of local folklore for over a decade. It was the house that remained untouched, like a wound that refused to heal. Sarah had spent the last few months researching the area, tracking down forgotten documents, and interviewing the few remaining townsfolk who still dared speak of Hollow Creek. Most of them had left years ago, unable to withstand the strange happenings that plagued the town. Those who stayed either grew sick, their minds unraveling, or disappeared without a trace. No one come to visit this place anymore. The road had become impassable to most, and the once bustling settlement had withered into ruins, the echoes of its past only surviving in hushed conversations. And yet, Sarah had felt an inexplicable pull to this place, a force she couldn't explain, but also she couldn't ignore. She had to see it for herself. The map had led her right to the heart of the woods, the overgrown path barely visible, and the thick trees around her created an oppressive, almost suffocating atmosphere. The road stretched ahead, bending and winding deeper into the forest, as though the earth itself wanted to swallow her whole. Sarah swallowed her fear, but her pulse quickened. She had come this far. As her headlights flickered over the trees, she spotted the old Miller house in the distance, a crumbling silhouette that loomed like a sentinel watching her approach. The house was far more imposing than she'd expected. It was a Gothic looming structure with tall, narrow windows that seemed to peer at her, the overgrown vines crawling up its walls like fingers from another time. The once pristine white paint had peeled right off. It was gone and was replaced by streaks of gray and moss. But despite its decay, there was something almost alive about it. The way the shadows clung to its foundation, the way the wind howled through the broken panes of the attic. Her breath hitched as she parked her car, the engine coughing to a stop. The fog was thicker now, wrapping all around the car like a cold embrace, as if urging her to turn back. But Sarah shook off the warning. There was no turning back. She had come here to uncover the truth, and nothing was going to stop her. As she stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel beneath her boots was the only sound that broke the silence of the woods. Her flashlight flickered momentarily, casting a strange shadow on the ground that made her heart race. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on her, its ancient trees watching from the edges. The house, dark and silent, stood before her, its windows black like empty eyes. The door was ajar, creaking softly with the wind. Sarah pushed it open, her heart hammering in her chest. The air inside was stale, filled with the scent of dust and something older. A decay that didn't belong to just the building, but something more ancient, something much more sinister. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight as she stepped inside, and the silence wrapped itself around her like a suffocating blanket. The first thing she noticed was the thick layer of dust that coated, well, everything. The furniture, the walls, the shattered remnants of old photos that hung crooked on the walls. The air seemed to pulse with an energy that wasn't quite natural. But what truly caught her attention was the faint, almost impierceable sound of something moving. It was a short, like a soft shuffle, a breathless whisper, a slow, dragging sound that echoed down the hall. Sarah froze, her skin prickling with the undeniable sense that she was not alone. She moved cautiously toward the staircase, her feet light but hesitant, as if the house itself were waiting, watching her every step. The whispers, faint but growing louder, were no longer a soft murmur. They were urgent, they were desperate. Get out, they seemed to whisper. Turn back. But the pull to climb the staircase was much too strong. She had to know. She had to understand. And at the top of the staircase, a narrow hallway stretched out before her. The faintest hint of light flickered beneath the door at the end of the hall. The same door she had seen in the photos. The one that seemed to always be open in every picture of the Millers. Something about that room just felt different. It felt waiting. But waiting for what? Sarah reaches for the doorknob, her fingers trembling, the whispers just kind of turned into these voices. They're no longer whispering, they're louder, and they're all talking at once. But they weren't voices anymore. They are now faces. Pale, twisted faces appeared in the corners of her vision, their mouths moving soundlessly as if they had always been there, as if they had always been watching. The door swings open with an eerie creak. Inside the room was a time capsule, old furniture covered in white sheets, and they sat undisturbed in the center. But it wasn't the furniture that held her attention. It was the photographs. Hundreds of photographs, each one framed, hanging crooked on the walls. The Millers were everywhere, smiling, laughing, as though they were just like any other family. But their eyes were different. Every single one had been scratched out, the pupils replaced with black smudges. Suddenly, a sharp noise from above, a loud crash, pulled her attention back to the ceiling. The hum of electricity filled the air, and the temperature in the room dropped. Sarah's breath misted in front of her, her heart pounding in her chest. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerges. A tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes. He was dressed in tattered clothing, his face pale and drawn. His mouth twitched, as if he was trying to form words, but nothing comes out. Just the unmistakable sound of whispers. Don't open it, the man mouthed silently. But Sarah could hear the words loud and clear in her mind. It will take you too. But it was too late. Her hand had already reached for the chest at the center of the room. The moment her fingers brushed the cold, weathered wood, the house seemed to groan, as if it were alive, protesting her touch. The chest springs open, all on its own, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, there was nothing but dust and a single leather-bound book. The moment she lifted it from its resting place, a deep rumble filled the room, shaking the walls and the floor beneath her. The whispers became screams, the walls closing in, pressing against her. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, reaching out with tendrils of darkness. And then the house let out a sound, a terrible, shrill cry that seemed to rip through her very soul. Sarah dropped the book, but it was too late. The attic door slams shut, trapping her inside. The world around her spun as though she was caught in the grip of a storm, her vision swimming. She saw flashes of the Millers' faces, hollow, twisted, their eyes voids closing in around her. Then the whispers returned, clear as day. Now, you're one of us. When Sarah opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the decaying house. The walls were fresh and clean, the furniture pristine. But the photographs on the walls, they were all the same. Only now was her own face among the Millers. The mirror at the center of the room reflected her, not as she was, but as she had become, pale, hollow-eyed, a part of the house, part of the curse. And as the echoes of the house grew louder, she realized that Hollow Creek had claimed her, just as it had claimed the Millers before. Her scream joined the whispers, fading into eternity, as the house swallowed another soul. As Sarah's final cry dissipated, a subtle movement stirred within the mist. something ancient, something deep in the earth beneath Hollow Creek was waking. The house, with its blood-soaked history, was no longer just a structure. It had become a living, breathing entity, feeding on the souls it captured, ever hungry. And Sarah's transformation was far from the end. Over time, Hollow Creek would continue to lure the curious, the brave, and the foolish. The whispers would reach the ears of others, beckoning him toward the cursed house. But each soul that entered would only find one fate, a place among the twisted photos, lost in the darkness, forever waiting for the next. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the house, Sarah's hollow eyes watched, waiting for the day when another unsuspecting wanderer could cross its threshold. Only then could the cycle begin again. And that is another episode of the Tales of the Beard, the Echoes of Hollow Creek. So I have to ask, would you be brave enough? Would you enter this house? Would you beckon the calls? Maybe the calls are beckoning you, and maybe this is a sign to not answer those calls. Let it go to voicemail. But either way, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Tales of the Beard. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Appreciate you, your time. You could be anywhere in the world listening to anything. And you decided to do this for some reason. Can't thank you enough. We'll be back next week. Take care, everybody.